All right. Good morning from Los Angeles. Good afternoon, good evening, rest of the world, wherever everyone is. I think we've got people all around the world today. So I'm Dave Whelan, based here in Los Angeles. I'm going to introduce my guest, Shawn Young, in a second. Just back to our kind of topic of the day. So full disclosure on me, I did actually study AI once upon a time, but then I sort of went to the dark side of business, which led me into the business of technology, which led me into the business of health technology. And so I've spent a number of years at the intersection of technology, health, and wellness. And over that time, I've developed a passion for decision-making through data. And so I have a passion for it. Shawns made an entire career and life out of it. And so we'll chat about that in a minute. I'm here in LA. I am the CEO of an organization called Bioscience LA, which is a nonprofit innovation catalyst growing the life sciences ecosystem in the greater LA region. How do we grow funding? How do we grow space? How do we grow talent? And how do we create better awareness around that? And looks like we're getting Shawn's tech tweaked here. So I'm going to introduce Shawn in a second. But before that, just in terms of the flow, so we've got about I guess 40 minutes here in front of our digital fire. And so what I'm going to do is, Shawn and I will chat for a bit about his background. I've got some questions in mind around data, around population, certainly around the COVID, COVID pandemic. But then definitely encourage you, please leave notes in the chat here. Please leave comments where we can answer questions. Feel free to tweet us. I've worn my Pink Socks shirt today, and so I'm hoping to get a few screen grabs and tweets and things out there. And if someone else could weigh in, I can't see Shawn on the screen right now. I see just a box for Shawn, but all right, Carlos is confirming no video feed.
Can you hear me, Dave?
We can hear you all right, yeah. Weird.
Let me try turning off and on again. We did have this morning, they said, the internet provider said.
Yeah, we're if your house is anything like mine, you get to a certain point of the day, which is usually about now, and then we've hit our sort of bandwidth limit. It seems like
so still nothing. I can try to move. Okay, let me.
Yeah. Let me. Oh, hang on. There you go. All right. Yeah.
You got it.
We're back.
Okay.
Awesome. Cool. All right. Well, let's we'll dive in. We'll dive in while we still got video. So as I said, really happy to have Shawn Young here with us. I've actually known Shawn for 10 plus years or something like that. We're both Stanford alums and both UCLA alums, and here in Los Angeles. I'm going to try to walk through a quick little litany of work that Shawn's doing right now, and then we'll dive into some conversation about it. So most excitingly, Shawn is the executive director of the University of California Institute for Prediction Technology, which is a institute that spans the entire UC system, and which I think is pretty unique and exciting. And that emerged from the UCLA Center for Digital Behavior that he started and several years ago and runs. And then most recently, I guess last year, Shawn moved from UCLA primarily to UC Irvine, joining our friends like George Tolomachenko, who was on this morning, where he's a medical school and informatics professor with both departments of emergency medicine and informatics. And so you're working on a lot simultaneously, Shawn, which is awesome, and I think that's always your nature. Before we dive into kind of exactly what you're doing at the UC Institute for Prediction Technology, maybe just walk us through your career a little bit. How did you get here, and how did you end up in this spot?
It's I think we were on a panel. I remember there was a panel for UCLA alumni. And we were asked that question. There were a group of us, and the career path was nothing, if you're medical school or, where you're going. But let's see, I started off in ethnomusicology and playing music and in punk bands and things like that. Took some trips around South America traveling, playing music, and then wound up in grad school for psychology. Worked at Cisco Systems and NASA, doing some work with simulations and games for astronauts, and then found myself after graduate school, for a number of reasons, found myself in staying in academia. I thought I was going to go to law school. I thought I was going to be a musician, but ended up taking a position in medicine, and then been doing research in technology and psychology and medicine, kind of at that intersection for the last 10, 15 years.
Cool. Well, yeah, I think, if you ask me the same question, my path is just as varied, and I feel like I'm still trying to figure out where I'm going. So, join the club. I'm guessing we have a lot of folks online who are, share that similar story and kind of passion for exploration.
Well, and I think it's fun, and it's a good part of life. But we're going to be talking about AI and things like that now, but it's really helpful having that breadth and experience for things that are cutting edge, as we'll get into AI, just because of there's technical issues, there's social, there's ethical, there's all kinds of different things. And so it's, who knows where I'm going to wind up in the future. I just kind of, I'm sure the same for you.
Yeah, exactly. So just kind of giving us a little bit of like level setting or context setting. So digital behavior research, what does that, what does that mean? If you're explaining this to, a kindergartner, sort of, what is this?
Kindergartner, well, they're already amazing with the phone. You just say, this can change the way you do things. These devices, these technologies can change the way you do things. People often think that as new devices, new technologies started coming out, people thought, look at all the bad things that are happening from the internet, that are happening from dating websites. We do a lot of HIV research, that are happening from phone apps and addiction and all these things. But there's also a positive spin on it. And so these technologies can be used for good or bad. We study both sides of it and try to use them for good things and good health behavior change.
Got it. And so this is really connecting all of these disparate sort of silos of data, or, finding different data paths, connecting them, and then figuring out what it means.
Yeah, that's the AI side. I kind of stumbled on the AI side. By training, I'm a social behavioral psychologist and health services researcher. So I was coming into things saying, how can we get people to be healthier using technologies? How can we get people to be tested for diseases? How can we prevent pandemics, things like that? And so we developed a bunch of technologies and approaches to that have been able to help people change their behavior. But kind of backing into it, realized there's so much data from these technologies. And so, maybe it's been about 10 years where we started looking at how people use the technologies and the data that can be used from it, the things people share. They'll share all kinds of personal information, and that can be turned into models and maps and visualization tools and all kinds of things to predict behavior, to predict disease outbreaks, to predict crime. But with the ultimate goal, my ultimate interest as a psychologist is, if we can predict something, we can prevent it, or we can change it or address it. And so it ultimately comes back to all that AI and prediction, is that we want to be able to predict change and improve things. Yeah.
Got it. That's great. I think we'll come back to that sort of prediction and change in a little bit. But just thinking about sort of the theme of this event and the world that we're living in right now, it seems to me, at least as a news watcher, there's just there's so much data. I mean, I've never seen so much data about anything being, presented and represented and misrepresented, depending upon which network you're watching or which Twitter feed you're looking at. But it seems like we've got the ability to access more data and analytics than ever around COVID-19, which on the surface seems great, but sort of what have we done right with that so far in the past, 9 months, and where did we miss the mark?
What have we done? Well, I'll start with missing the mark.
That's where I jump to as well. So.
It's I don't have to go into too much detail about where we've missed the mark. I mean, people are dying, people are sick. There's a ton of politics back and forth, both sides of. I don't need to go into where we've missed the mark, but what we've done right. I was so impressed and excited. I mean, things hit in March, and from tracking technologies and things, you kind of see this coming. We started doing research with some colleagues at City University of Hong Kong School of Data Science. We were doing this in January, just looking at what we can do about the coming pandemic and what was happening in China. And then you see, as you're checking your Twitter feed, and there's, Italy next and Iran, and you see what's coming. And being in emergency medicine, we were having calls every night when things started coming in March, and it was obviously scary. But what I started to see happening was, in a way that had never happened before, groups coming together, academics who are often resistant to work outside of academia or trust people outside of academia, industry people who are often, reluctant for various reasons to share tools or ideas or things like that. And it was really brought together so many different groups really trying to solve this problem. And it was so exciting seeing that happening and being a part of it. And it's led us to be able to now be doing research in AI and more broadly, and not just for COVID. I mean, we can talk about some of this for COVID, but being able to have partnerships to access tools and technologies and teams and skills and people that we never would have been able to access and have those relationships before if it wasn't for the pandemic. And I think, I'm just a eternal optimist in general. And so I think, no doubt the current situation is forever changing the way we're going to be doing things, the way we interact with technologies and education, all these things. But I think it's exciting because it presents a lot of opportunities and unknown and chance for people working in the field of tech, for young people to be able to have an influence on so many areas of life. Again, on the future of education could just be completely different than what it's ever been before. Future of medical care, medical education, work life, all of these things. It's a chance for people to have an impact, and we want to be on the side of trying to have that be a positive impact. But yeah, I'm very optimistic and excited just about the way everyone's come together during this.
Yeah, I mean, I share a lot of that, and I think there's I'm definitely cautiously optimistic, maybe more than cautiously, that we've certainly seen inflection points around technology, and look at telehealth and how that has the 2020, in less than a year, we've broken down 10, 15, 20 years of boundaries and restrictions and resistance to telehealth in a way that, now it seems like, that's going to be the norm for so much. And as you said, education, same way, even, but again, between us, we've gone to a lot of great schools, and you wonder, are people going to go to those same schools for the same reasons in the future? And, my kids are 10 and 6, and I have no idea what they're going to be doing, in 5, 10, 15 years in terms of things like that. So I think there will be a lot of positive
position at UC Irvine or UCLA. Are these positions going to exist? Who knows? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. In particular, and I think, we're here in LA, but, this is, I think this situation or, question exists across the country, around the world, in a situation like this where we're talking about data, we're talking about access to data. There's questions around contact tracing. There's questions around testing and what happens to test data, whether that's going to the government or going to insurance providers or going to employers. And, especially here in the US, we've gone from healthcare crisis to economic crisis to now layered on top of that a number of interrelated social crises. And so questions of sort of healthcare, health data, access to healthcare, and how that overlays with socioeconomic, racial disparities in the population. It seems like you've been kind of working on pieces of that again for your whole career. And so what are you seeing now that we can learn from that to do better, both today, because we're still in the middle of this, and then how do we build on top of that?
I mean, I think, and there have been too many silos of whether it's academics, industry, startup versus more established companies, people writing about ethical issues. There are too many silos, and too many people in technology and things like Twitter are just making this even more so with cancel culture and things like that. But just criticizing others without embracing and working together. And I think what can be done and should be done is to bring all these groups together. You joked, what did you say at the beginning? You moved to the dark side or something, right?
Exactly.
But I mean, I believe that the people working on technologies that most of us would consider the dark side, I think they need to be involved in the conversation. They're more aware of the ethical issues than anyone else. I mean, there needs to be checks and balances and things like this in developing tools and AI. But I think what we need to do moving forward in the future is, and I'm speaking as an academic and someone in the public sector who works with government agencies, I don't think decisions should be made entirely by academics and public sector people. We really need to bring in all different sides to be in the conversation, and that can be done in an ethical way. It needs to be done in an ethical way, and it can be where people can check each other. But we need to come to some informed decisions together. We need to have a plan for how we can fully disclose all information up front, so we're aware of the risks. We need to make clear decisions, not doing them just by political views or industry and financial. But if we all come together, I think we can be able to really press hard questions at each other and make a decision together. But we need to be open in order to do that.
Yeah, no, totally agree. And I'm going to, press on this a little bit more, especially around this question of, this contact tracing, which I think was sort of, it was really getting pushed. It felt like that was kind of a major sort of topic, and kind of like, we've got to get contact tracing up and running. That seemed to be going for a few months earlier this year. And then, I'm not hearing as much about it, but, you look at kind of the Google and Apple, came together and, we're building this technology, which I know a number of countries around the world have created apps that leverage it. The US is not doing that as a country. And so I think there's 4 or 5 states, maybe a few more now, that are using it. So, first of all is, thinking about your access to data, how you look at trends. Do we need technology like that? And if we do, how do we get there in a way that actually makes it meaningful?
Yeah, we could have a 6-hour conversation about just contact tracing, I think. We started, when was this, in May, maybe. This was pretty awesome. So having move now and being at Irvine, where my appointments split in informatics, computer science, and then primary and emergency medicine. I sent an email one night to the computer science and informatics listserv saying we want to put together a contact tracing system, because we were in conversations with the county where they thought there's promise behind this, right? And overnight got about 25 students who are saying, we're designers, we're developers, let's do this. So we spent about 24 hours putting together a list of what's the competition out there, not competition, but what's the, how would we leverage other technologies? Would we build our own? Hopefully with being able to leverage others who's sharing data. For a number of reasons, we ended up not moving forward building and having conversations with Google and Apple. As after that, there was information that came out. Short of it is, I think there is a lot of potential in contact tracing, especially in contact tracing apps. We're about to start a study. Right now, we're in discussions around school reopenings and things like that. And I think there's a lot of potential around contact tracing apps, especially for their ability for measuring social distancing and things like that. Not necessarily even just for contact tracing itself, but because of the combined capabilities for social distancing. Because we want to create some behavior change interventions to try to, especially among youth and in schools, facilitate social distancing. It still needs to be done. We're doing this in organizational settings, like we have an application ready to go to try something like this within the ED and within UC Irvine more broadly. It needs to be done in organizational settings right now, where you can have, you can require, or you can have a lot of people downloading and using the app for it to be useful is the big limitation. So there's some ideas and needs for new development in technology, but the general idea of how do we move past the old, how do we move past like the long-term approach that we've had, where someone tests positive and then someone from the county has to find them, call them up and say, okay, who were you with for the past 2 weeks? Can you remember? Like, I can't remember what I did yesterday. And we're asking people to remember all these things. So there's definitely a need for innovation in this area. And I think it's going to come, and this pandemic's helping to stimulate it.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. I guess, you talk about the speed with that and sort of, figuring out who you were with. One of the challenges layered on top of that is, it seems like we still don't have fast enough testing. And so the way I've sort of, the best analogy I've heard is that like the state of testing right now is watching the weather forecast for last week.
Right.
Like what nobody does that, right? There's no point in knowing what the weather was going to be last week. And so is part of this getting access to sort of better, faster, real-time data just on test results, and then tying that into this location and, contact, et cetera?
Yeah, if you want to, if you're talking about AI modeling now and things like that, I mean, the AI models in these areas are dependent upon high quality data, high quality public health, medical, or really any data, depending upon what you're doing. And so it pushes it back onto the health departments to say, we need to have better surveillance systems. We need to have more open, transparent, and frequent reporting of data. We need data that we can understand, just positive cases where there could be a batch that's saved up for a week and then dumped on a certain day. That's not helpful. So we can look at hospitalizations or deaths, but it really just, at a high level, really changes and encourages the conversation around what are high quality data, what do we need for AI models to make sense and be valuable. And then just getting into the potential of it and some of the things that we do, for example, I mean, we've looked at social media data and how the topics people discuss online. So we started this many years ago with HIV and found that people talking about who they're having sex with or the drugs that they're using, that information could be used to predict future HIV cases. We found that internet searches in cities where there were spikes in Google searches for opioids, prescription or non-prescription opioids, anything from methadone to China White perks. Cities where there were spikes in these searches for opioids. 1 year later, we found spikes in those same cities for emergency department visits for heroin. So as soon as the pandemic came, we started applying some of these approaches using social media data, using mobility data, using all kinds of different data sources, because the promise behind this is that we don't have to wait for surveillance data to accumulate. We don't have to wait for, thanks, Nick. We don't have to wait for data to accumulate, and we can be able to use real-time data to have real-time surveillance methods and potentially be able to predict disease outbreaks, things like that, as we've been doing. But in order to do that, we need frequently updated data. We need high quality data to run these models. We need to be able to have, not annual or monthly or even weekly, but we need as close to real time as possible so that we can be able to have more accurate forecasting models.
Got it. And I think that not that these are three different groups, because there's certainly lots of overlap. But you say we have science, we have the public sector, and we have the population, right? And these various groups are sharing data, sharing ideas, sharing guidance. And we got a question here. Adley Ephraim was asking about things like scientists coming together around a policy or a plan like the Great Barrington Declaration, or we've seen scientists. I think we now have the third or fourth major science publication that has made a political endorsement or a political recommendation of sorts, over the past couple of weeks. And so we're seeing science and government almost vying for the attention of the general population right now. And, especially given that you've done so much work around behavior and sort of how, individuals respond to data, respond to what they're seeing. How do we turn this into something good, where it's not just a fight between, a fight between good and evil, or a fight between parties? How do we actually turn it into a real dialogue to move things forward?
It's really cool that they mentioned Great Barrington Declaration in there. Are you familiar with that one? So I'm
a little bit. To Adley, whom I know well, and I'm not surprised he's deeply steeped in what's going on here. But would love just your thoughts on that, and kind of what it means for policy and kind of the role of science influencing the public.
So maybe Adley can jump in if I'm wrong on this, but I think, and you'll appreciate this, if that's the one that I'm thinking of. That's the one from my one of my grad advisors from Stanford, Jay Bhattacharya.
Right. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I've seen his posts and stuff about that. I think we need it. Well, one thing that's exciting is that seeing academics be much more involved on Twitter and have a voice in this discussion, and move from traditionally academics most academics don't want to get involved in policy, don't want to say something that's too controversial and just kind of stick with the science. But it's been nice to see academics starting to do that and really describe their work and do work with larger policy implications, talk about it, and become more comfortable getting out there with the media and be rewarded for it, or I guess in a lot of cases punished for it.
There's a long history of politicians punishing scientists for speaking their minds. I recognize that.
But I think that's, just going back to, we need to, as scientists, I think we need to keep taking risks in expressing our voice, and it's okay to be wrong as a scientist. I mean, it's okay for anyone to be wrong. You just need to be full disclosure of what you're doing, why you have the view that you do. And I think I believe in crowdsourced views and things coming together and us being able to ultimately learn how to filter out the noise. So I think the solution is coming together and being able to just be. I think the challenge is on the psychology side of how do we encourage and teach objectivity. That's it. Do we rely on technologies to? Do we rely on Facebook to tell us what's objective, what's true or not? Or do we rely on human psychology and people and groups and crowds to be able to create a social norm of how we should act and how we should talk and what we should talk about? I mean, our interventions are built on peer leaders. So we have our behavior change interventions, probably like the bread and butter interventions, or we take peer role models, we train them in a certain area, and then we let them deliver the intervention online and change people's behavior. So I'm a big believer in we need to get respected, influential, passionate people involved, train them in the psychology and science of how do we help filter out the noise and make objective statements and teach other people what's accurate and what's not. And that's going to change by time. We've saw that here, that the science changes, and that's okay. But we just need to be honest and objective as we're communicating with each other.
Got it. No, it's great insights. And you mentioned a couple of things there about sort of the almost the crowdsourcing idea, and that ties into one of the other things that you've, I think, done a fair amount of over the past several years are hackathons, and sort of bringing together disparate groups to solve some problems. And would love to hear, one, have you done that around COVID, but just more broadly, sort of, what do hackathons mean for kind of this intersection of, I guess, back to, science, public sector, and the population?
Yeah, I think a hackathon, I mean, those embody and what we're talking about and are exciting because they really do bring people together. So I created a class maybe about 5, 7, 8 years ago at UCLA, which was teaching. This was for poverty and health in Latin America, a cluster there. And it was to teach non-technical students about the potential of within 24 hours developing important solutions that could address public health problems, designed for non-technical students. It was awesome teaching that class, and each year we'd end with a hackathon to address unmet medical needs. That's kind of turned into, as we got funding from National Institute on Drug Abuse, we turned that into opioid hackathon, which we'd been having each year. And we would get teams from Facebook, Google, Oracle. This was in collaboration with the Department of Health and Human Services and the Office of the Chief Data Officer there. And we'd have academics, bringing together different teams to try to solve these problems and figure out, like for opioid overdose, how we can prevent it, what kind of models we can do. We haven't done anything like that for COVID. We've definitely talked about it, but it's just been like in a sprint. It's now things are starting to slow down a little bit as this has become the new norm. But COVID has just been a sprint of no time to plan, just react.
Yeah.
So we haven't, putting together an event like that takes a lot of time and effort, and So I'd love to do something like that in the future in some new version of that for COVID, but we haven't done it. But I think that it's kind of happened naturally. We haven't needed to put together an event and say, here's a cash prize for the winner if you come up with an idea for this. Like I said, within 24 hours, we had 25 students saying, I want to work on this and I want to try to build a contact tracing app to make a difference. And you can put them on different teams and people are motivated to do things. So, part of that I think is just over the past, I don't know how long Hackathon's been going on, 20 years or so, over the past amount of time and just startup culture and then obviously the pandemic, people have been coming together and naturally this has been happening. And I think that's the way of the future.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And again, you've got your UC Institute, you've got roles at UCLA and UC Irvine. So you're part of this amazing network here in Southern California. I think all of those institutions are connected to others, and would love a sense of sort of how you're fostering collaboration between those institutions. But then more importantly, as we think about everyone who's on part of this event right now around the world, how can they engage with you, or sort of what help do you need to move some of this research forward, and where can the general Life Summit population plug in? Yeah,
and I think this is conversation, so I can ask you a question too. I don't know if it's interview or conversation.
Absolutely, turn the tables on me. I love it. It's good.
But I'd like same thing with you. I'd want to hear from running SICN and bringing people together and hearing different opinions. I'd be curious what you think. But so first of all, how to get a hold of me? Reach out. I say that I think at the last page of the book, so I wrote a book, Stick With It, on the science of behavior change, and I say, please, reach out. I love hearing from people in each podcast or thing. You can get a hold of me either on Twitter, I'm Sean Young PhD. There's our website, predictiontechnology.ucla.edu. You could send me an email. My phone number is on, I think what we need. So I've outlined that there's so many different types of people that we need. We need so technical people. We need public health people. We need researchers, industry people pretty much from every area. So it's exciting. The approach that I take, we'll get emails and just someone who's passionate, and they'll say, I don't know how I can help, but I want to. And then we'll route them off to someone from our team or staff to try to get them involved. There's, on the AI side, we're labeling data. We're trying to figure out, in order to make the AI models work, we need to take raw data and make sense of it. And so we'll train people in how do you be a domain expert that can teach a machine something. So there's that type of work. There's obviously data science modeling. There's visualizations. There's behavior change technologies. So really, it's just great connecting with people and being involved like that. And that's where, it'd be great to hear your thoughts on that, because you are just the connector across networks and
I try, as you mentioned, between Stanford alumni networks and UCLA and now building this life sciences kind of ecosystem in LA. First of all, I think, and this entire conference kind of embodies that this intersection of it's AI and healthcare and data, and there's the personal side and the technological side, and big and small. And I think what we're really seeing is that, and as your hackathon concept shows, that, problems are solved by different kinds of people, diverse groups of people with different ideas. And so ultimately it's less, we're looking for this specific expertise than, we're looking for great ideas. We're looking for great energy. We're looking for new approaches to the same old problem, because ultimately I think that's where the innovation is going to happen. And I know we've got a global audience here, but I'll say that I am biased that I think Southern California, it's just we've got tremendous population diversity and amazing academic institutions and amazing industries that touch so many different things, from technology to life sciences to aerospace to entertainment, and all of these things kind of come together to help create new ways of doing business and new ways of solving problems, which is really exciting. And I think we've met a challenge in COVID, and I think about what we've all probably watched a lot of Bill Gates over the past few months, and I think the one thing we've learned from that is this feels big, but it's relatively small, and there's going to be something bigger down the line and something more complex. And the more we can learn from what we've got right now and start to, as you said, put some future thinking systems in place to be able to solve problems, the better. So excited to do that. Again, you can I'm on Twitter at DJ Whelan or at Bioscience LA, and looking forward to kind of keeping these conversations going. Shawn, I'm gonna end with one thing that you glossed over, but and I don't think I realized it about you, but I have to ask the question. So you spent time as a year and a half as an A&R guy for Jimmy Iovine, creator of Beats, and any amazing discoveries, or more importantly, what was the one that got away? Who didn't you sign that you would be a producer right now were it not for that shift in decision making?
Oh man, that was I think that was a good decision getting away. It was, I've definitely got some stories. I think we don't have time for some of the stories.
Time's up. All right.
but no, it was as an experience, coming in as a musician, the best part was talking with all the musicians and meeting with them. And no, I don't think there was any musicians that got away or anything like that. I can't imagine what my life would have been like if it just totally different. But no, it just gave, kind of like we were talking about at the beginning, an understanding of the other side of things. Musicians are doing this for their art and for their work. It was a flip side.
No, I think that's great. And I think so much about behavior and personal preference, behavior, and what motivates people. I think music is such an interesting lens to both look at that and drive that, and I'm sure you've taken some interesting cues from that. So next year we'll be back and we'll talk about music. How about that? We'll do a whole music session next time. Awesome. Well, thank you, Shawn, so much. Really been great to chat this morning. I think they're giving us the cue to head out to the investor roundtable, which is a different room, but I'll be poking around the conference the next couple days as well. So feel free to message me here or reach out otherwise. And Shawn, looking forward to catching up again soon, and hopefully we'll be in the same place one of these days again soon.
I know. All right. Thanks so much,
awesome.
Dave.
Thanks all. Take care.